Welcome to the Atlanta History Center's virtual author talk featuring former director of the CIA, John O. Brennan, in conversation with NBC's chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell, to discuss Director Brennan's new memoir, Undaunted, My Fight Against America's Enemies at Home and Abroad. I'm Kate Whitman, Vice President of Author Programs and Community Engagement for the Atlanta History Center, and I'm glad that you're joining us this evening for what is sure to be a really fantastic event. Most of you joining us have already purchased your copy of Undaunted from our official book-selling partner, Acapella Books. Those books will be mailed to you and delivered after tonight's event. Additional autographed copies can be purchased from Acapella Books directly from their website. Please submit your questions via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Questions must be submitted by 7:30 in order to get asked. And now to introduce our esteemed speakers. John O. Brennan was one of President Obama's most trusted national security advisors during all 8 years of the Obama administration. First as Assistant to the President for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism, and then as Director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Mr. Brennan had previously worked in the CIA from 1980 to 2005, where he specialized in Middle Eastern affairs and counterterrorism, and served as President Clinton's daily intelligence briefer. Mr. Brennan received a bachelor's degree in political science from Fordham University in 1977 and a master's degree in government from the University of Texas at Austin. Joining him this evening is Andrea Mitchell. Andrea Mitchell is NBC News' chief foreign affairs correspondent and host of MSNBC's Andrea Mitchell Reports. She is the network's leading voice on U.S. foreign policy and international diplomacy. Additionally, Mitchell reports on intelligence and national security issues across all NBC News and MSNBC properties. So as you can see, she is the perfect person to be joining Director Brennan this evening. Director Brennan, Ms. Mitchell, thank you both for joining us. And now I will turn it over to you, Ms. Mitchell.
Well, thank you so much, Kate. And I can't tell you how happy I am to be here with John Brennan. And can I tell you that this book, you've all, I hope, gotten the book or it's on the way. This is such an exciting and inspiring read. And it's the book we've all been waiting for, especially right now. It is great tonic for people who believe in public service, who believe in good government. And in an honest account, John, we've known each other a long time in different roles, but I can just tell you, I learned so much from this. And the fact that I am as tired as I am tonight is because I spent the last few nights reading it while still covering all of the big events that are happening in Washington. So thank you so much for letting me be part of this program tonight with all of our friends in Atlanta. And I wanted to ask you, first of all, how you feel the world is looking at the United States right now. We have a president who is, he says he's better, but he's in the first days of COVID, and it's a very unpredictable disease, as we know. The economy is in a terrible situation because of all of the effects of this virus and the lockdowns and the start and stop, attempts to deal with the virus. And the world is also looking at a time of continuing wars and conflicts and adversaries unchecked. How are they looking at the U.S. with a president this close to an election who is ill right now and fighting back?
Well, Andrea, first of all, I want to thank you and the Atlanta History Center for participating in this event tonight. It's quite an honor for me to join you for this discussion about my memoir. I think the question that you ask is a very good one. It's one that I've wrestled with, not just over the last several weeks or months, but also over the last several years, because I've been concerned about the U.S. role in the world and the perception of the United States, which really has been the leader of the free world for the last 75 years after World War II. We always took a leadership role in terms of speaking out on human rights as well as global security and stability. And now, over the last several years, we have become internally very polarized, very disunited. And now with this pandemic, I think there are great questions about whether or not our government is even up to the task of being able to fulfill its daily obligations, because Donald Trump has been felled by the COVID. A number of the members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has as well, senators, members of the White House staff. So any time before a presidential election, especially a hotly contested one, is a time of great unsettlement and uncertainty as far as what is going to be happening on the domestic political front. But you layer on top of that the past 3.5 years of Donald Trump's presidency. You also add to that the pandemic. I think there really is quite a bit of unnerving that has gone on around the globe, especially among our partners and allies that really have looked to the United States to be that rock of stability that maybe some other things have, are shaken, that they can always look to the United States as having a steady course. So I do agree that right now, in light of what's happening with the pandemic and still unknown exactly the trajectory it's going to take, especially since Donald Trump continues to downplay the seriousness of the virus, I do think that the weeks and months ahead are going to be challenging ones indeed.
In particular, what are your concerns about the upcoming election, given what we've seen the Russians do before? The intelligence community, the Director of National Intelligence, has put out statements that have actually been undercut by others in the intelligence community, saying that China, Iran, and Russia are all involved, but there's a lot of information that, in fact, Russia is the prime actor, that actually has active measures to at least spread disinformation more than China and Iran, while all three have capabilities in terms of, certainly in terms of cyber. But who do you think has intent right now, motive and capability?
Well, there are a lot of countries around the globe that have capabilities to interfere in some way in the election process. Some have a technical capability to, for example, pull down the voter registration rolls and cause confusion and chaos on election day. But what I see most of the foreign actors doing is trying to put information into that digital domain using social media platforms to try to shape the attitudes, the views, and even the votes of the American electorate. And the countries that you named, Iran, China, and Russia, certainly are among the top countries that I think have that capability as well as the intent. Russia, in my mind, clearly favors Donald Trump to get reelected. I think he has been, in many respects, a godsend to them for the last 3.5 years because he has fueled the polarization inside the United States. He has adopted policies that are very much, I think, in keeping with what Putin wants to accomplish. And so I think they're going to do in 2020 what they did in 2016, which was to assist him in his efforts. And using information operations and using the social media platforms, they really have the opportunity to push out that propaganda, both in terms of disinformation, as well as just information that they want to amplify. China, I think China has sort of a mixed view about who they want to emerge victorious in the November election. Yes, Donald Trump has been harsh on the trade front with China, but also I think Xi Jinping has to realize that Joe Biden is going to take a much more vocal and public role in terms of denouncing human rights abuses that are taking place around the world, including in China, against the Muslim Uyghurs, as well as against China's own population, and what China has been doing on Hong Kong. So I do not believe that China has the same very, single-minded intent that Russia has in terms of the election of Donald Trump. I do think that China is going to try to discredit Donald Trump's policies by pushing things out into that digital environment. But again, I think that they are going to be concerned if Joe Biden emerges victorious. Then you have the others, Iran, North Korea, even terrorist organizations that will try to sow disunity in the United States because they do see that the more dysfunctional the United States government is, the less likely the United States is going to be able to deal effectively with these world issues.
Have you been able, through working on your book and also through what you've observed, have you been able to figure out why Donald Trump seems to have this fascination with Vladimir Putin?
Well, I think, he has tended to admire the other authoritarian leaders in the world who I think reflect a lot of his own attributes and features, whether it is a Vladimir Putin or whether it is a Kim Jong-un of North Korea, whether it is a Duterte of the Philippines or Erdogan of Turkey. He really does see those strongmen, the ones that, oppress and suppress, political opposition in their countries, as very much in keeping with his philosophy about how a person should lead a government. It is not leadership. It is, in fact, the absence of leadership in my mind. But I do believe that Russia is a special case. It is very, very strange that Donald Trump has been so obsequious toward Vladimir Putin. My own view is that he has concerns about what the Russians might do to try to undercut him, whether it's because of past financial or business dealings, or because of some type of personal indiscretions of Donald Trump that the Russians can reveal. But also, I think it's because Donald Trump is thinking about his days after he leaves office so that he can reap the benefits of having a good relationship with Vladimir Putin and the oligarchs that support him, so that he can then pursue those types of business deals that he was pursuing earlier, such as Trump Tower in Moscow and other types of lucrative opportunities. So I think it's a combination of things when it comes to Russia. But Donald Trump is the only one who knows, what he has done in Russia, with Russia, as well as personally, that maybe he is afraid of a possible revelation.
You write that you met him once when you were briefing him during the transition on the suspicions of Russian interference in the election. And tell us all about your assessment that he was trying to figure out what you knew about him.
Yes, I've conducted many briefings of foreign governments, foreign intelligence services over the course of my more than 3 decades in government service. And frequently when I was going to be briefing them about something that they had done that we were holding them to account for, they would receive the information in a manner of trying to discern exactly what we knew, how we knew it, so that they could in fact uncover any type of human sources or technical sources that might be giving us that information. I had that same feeling when I sat down with Donald Trump. He didn't demonstrate the intellectual curiosity that all the 6 presidents that I had served before him had shown whenever they received intelligence information. They wanted to learn the truth. They wanted to understand exactly what we knew, how we knew it. They would challenge us, they would question us, but they did not have a personal political agenda in terms of receiving that information. With Donald Trump, he would frequently say in the briefing, well, it could have been China. And he was tend to dismiss some of the charges that we had, that the Russians in fact were responsible for this. It was incontrovertible that the Russians were trying to interfere in the election on his behalf in 2016. But again, I think during that briefing and subsequently, I have never had a sense that Donald Trump really is trying to understand what the Russians are doing, how we can stop them, and how important it is to our national security that indeed we do stop them.
And in fact, when I was in Helsinki covering the summit with Putin, and he publicly disagreed with our own intelligence assessments and accepted Vladimir Putin's denials of having tried to interfere, or interfered rather, in the 2016 election, to the point where Dan Coates, the former director of national intelligence, whom he fired subsequently, partly as over the dispute that actually started with that Helsinki summit, had to put out a statement in real time that same night, disagreeing with what the president had just said with the Russian leader.
Yes, and I've known Dan Coates for a number of years. He was a senator on the Senate Intelligence Committee, a man of great honesty and integrity. And I'm glad that he was willing to stand up to Donald Trump in that regard. Unfortunately, the current director of national intelligence, John Ratcliffe, doesn't have that same integrity and honesty. But like you, when I heard Donald Trump speak in Helsinki, and he said that when speaking with Vladimir Putin said that they didn't interfere in the election, and Donald Trump said, I see no reason, that they would, or to disbelieve him. I did lose my top I blew my top that time, and I tweeted out something like, it was nothing short of treasonous what Donald Trump was saying, because he was betraying our country, our intelligence professionals, by standing up publicly and basically siding with Vladimir Putin and the Russians against the U.S. intelligence community. And I found that just totally unconscionable.
And you had worked, as you say, for 6 presidents, under 6 presidents, and there were, ups and downs. You hadn't known then Senator Obama before he was elected. your relationship with George W. Bush was probably certainly colored by some of the things that were being done by Don Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney regarding Iraq and WMD. But you had never reached a point where you were, in an open feud with the President of the United States. Not before, not since.
No, never. And I had some real vehement disagreements with some of the policy choices. You mentioned George W. Bush. I think going into Iraq was an exceptionally ill-advised decision that really did have very unfortunate consequences for the Middle East and for U.S. national security interests. But George W. Bush approached his job with great seriousness, and he really tried to understand what policy decisions he should make that were going to advance and strengthen U.S. national security interests. But all of those presidents that I would brief, and I knew George H.W. Bush well, President Clinton, I was his daily briefer, George W. Bush and Barack Obama, they frequently would challenge the intelligence that I bring forward. And sometimes, the intelligence and analysis I would bring, was not well received by some people because it went against what some policy druthers were. But I never felt unwelcome. I never felt as though that they didn't want to listen to intelligence, that they didn't want to learn the truth. They would quibble with it sometimes, they would disagree with it, but they always valued the intelligence, contribution that women and men from all over this country make on a daily basis in the service of the CIA, NSA, and other intelligence and law enforcement agencies.
What is the morale like right now within the community, intelligence community, given the beating they've been taking from the White House, the way they've been disparaged, the professionals who have to work under this situation? And right now they've got a former Republican congressman who was a very strong critic of the intelligence community, now as the head of the 17 agencies.
I'd like to think that the intelligence professionals continue to focus on their mission, on their responsibilities, and carry those responsibilities out to the best of their ability. And when I would administer the oath of office to new classes of CIA officers every month in our lobby of CIA headquarters in front of the memorial wall, I would tell them that they would have to disregard all of the political gibberish that goes on in Washington. And they really needed to concentrate and focus on the mission at hand, because the intelligence mission is so important. But I can just imagine how demoralizing it is that the first customer, a president of the United States, continues to be dismissive of their work and their efforts, that denigrates their profession, and does not use the intelligence that they gather at sometimes great cost and sacrifice as he and the rest of the national security team formulate the foreign policies of the United States and national security policies. I have confidence that there are a number of people in the hierarchy of the administration that continue to value that intelligence. But I must say that from the little bit of information I get from my former colleagues, they are rather demoralized as a result of the fact that the first time in their professional careers, they have somebody in the White House who has such a negative attitude toward them.
I want to talk about the Iraq War for just a moment, because you write so, in a heartbreaking way, frankly, about the enhanced interrogation and your feelings that you should have spoken up more about it when it was underway, that you tried to. You went to your superiors, and that the situation was such that it was coming from the top and it was very hard to turn things around. But it was not within the code of the way you viewed the agency.
Well, the CIA has long been the 911 organization. When there's a crisis or when there's something that has to be done very quickly, frequently, if diplomacy is not available, even a military option is not immediately available, the administrations over the years have gone to the CIA and have pulled together a covert action program and given CIA the authorization to carry out that program. And in this instance, it was the detention interrogation program. And it was a program that was duly authorized by the President of the United States. It was a program that was deemed lawful by the highest legal advisory body in the executive branch, which is the Office of Legal Counsel in the Department of Justice. It was briefed to the congressional leadership and the committees of jurisdiction that have the intelligence oversight function. So it had all the features and the attributes of a legal program, and it was a lawful program. However, it was a very controversial one because of the tactics, the enhanced interrogation techniques that were used on known and suspected terrorists. So yeah, I was not in the chain of command at the time. I didn't have any, decision-making authority about the implementation of that program or the creation of that program. But I was still a very senior CIA officer. I was the deputy executive director, basically number 4 person in the organization. And I did express my concerns about the nature of the program and its harsh and brutal interrogation methods, but I didn't speak up maybe as forcefully as I should have, as I think I should have, looking back on it now. The CIA was ill prepared to carry out that program. They had no experience having a detention program or an interrogation program. Looking back on it now, I probably should have pushed more for the Department of Defense to detain combatants, which Al-Qaeda terrorists were on the battlefield. They have a history of capturing individuals and keeping them as POWs. The FBI, as well as the military, have great experience in interrogations and debriefings and elicitation. But the CIA has a can-do attitude, and at the time we were trying to prevent the recurrence of the horrific 9/11 attacks. So I really do understand why the program was authorized and implemented, but I wish that it never had happened, because clearly the CIA has taken it on the chin, and there has been much criticism, not only of the program as was lawfully constituted, but also some of the activities that took place outside of those 4 corners of the authorized program. So it was, I think, a dark chapter of our history, but I also will say that there was no organization that saved the homeland from another attack more than CIA. And CIA officers worked around the clock and around the world to protect their fellow citizens, and did a damn good job of it, despite the fact, notwithstanding the fact that program, the detention interrogation program, was a difficult one.
And a tremendous sacrifice. I mean, first in Afghanistan, and we think of the horrible assassinations in Khost and all of the losses that CIA suffered, some acknowledged and many not. Let me ask you about Saudi Arabia, because you were station chief, and you write so knowledgeably about Saudi Arabia. How can you explain what has happened where the leader, the nominal leader, Mohammed bin Salman, is really responsible, according to high confidence in terms of the analysis, for at least being aware, if not ordering, Jamal Khashoggi's brutal murder? And the world has seemingly forgotten that, especially after a G20 meeting 2 years ago, when President Trump sort of conferred grace on him, and he was no longer ostracized for it.
Yes, when we were talking about authoritarian leaders earlier, I definitely should have included Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who, as you point out, basically is the de facto leader of the kingdom. His father is the king, but Mohammed bin Salman has day-to-day oversight and authority of the Saudi government. It is my view that he was personally responsible for the horrific murder and dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi, a U.S. resident who was a reporter, the opinion writer for the Washington Post. And Mohammed bin Salman, like a lot of other authoritarian leaders, they do not accept any type of opposition that they believe threatens them. And unfortunately, many of them are paranoid as well. And Jamal Khashoggi was speaking up and out against some of the human rights issues in Saudi Arabia, and how Mohammed bin Salman was suppressing freedom of speech and a number of other rights in Saudi Arabia. Mohammed bin Salman has initiated some reforms, good on him, but he's doing it at the expense of the rights of Saudis to speak out. He's incarcerated a lot of individuals, including activists and a lot of female activists. And there are, I think, very credible reports of mistreatment of these individuals in Saudi prisons. And so I do believe that if Joe Biden is elected, and I certainly hope that he will be, that there is going to be a new chapter in that U.S.-Saudi relationship, because Mohammed bin Salman has been able to get away with a lot because Donald Trump has allowed it to be so. And not just inside of Saudi Arabia and the suppression of freedoms there, but also the horrific continued warfare and conflict in Yemen, where the Saudis have engaged in some, I think, wanton atrocities that They've been trying to crush the Houthi rebels there. So I do think that we really need to get the U.S.-Saudi relationship back on a better track, and it's going to require, I think, a real degree of candor from Washington to the Saudi monarchy regarding Mohammed Salman's actions and behavior.
And before we open it up to questions, I wanted to also ask you about Kim Jong-un, the Hermit Kingdom. I've been there a number of times when his father was a leader, and then once since, but still inexplicable to me that the president has this relationship and talks about love letters, and you can argue about the summits, whether or not we've given away too much to even get the summit, to go to the summit, to stop military exercises, but this pen pal relationship with Kim Jong-un, while they are still working on their missiles, and actually on submarine launch missiles, as well as other new weapon systems.
Yes, I think Kim Jong-un has been very, very clever in terms of how he has handled Donald Trump. He has flattered him. He has engaged in this bromance, as you mentioned, and he's basically duped Donald Trump in the United States into allowing him to continue in a very quiet but a very, I think, determined fashion to develop his nuclear program, his nuclear weapons program, his ballistic missile capabilities. And we really don't hear anything more about the U.S. pressure on North Korea. And so Donald Trump claims that he's been able to avoid any type of war that was going to take place between North Korea and the United States. Well, we were not bound for a war, but we were very concerned about the fact that North Korea now has a nuclear weapons program that can threaten not just U.S. interests, but also regional interests. And it appears as though he's been given a pass by Donald Trump because Donald Trump is more interested in having the photo shots, of him walking across the DMZ and shaking hands with Kim Jong-un, as well as in Singapore and other areas, and not really taking very demonstrable and tangible actions to reduce and hopefully reverse the pace of North Korea's nuclear weapons program and ballistic missile development.
Now, it's time for questions to bring in our wonderful guests here and the members. So let me first ask a question from Gabby. Given the distrust suffered by our intelligence agencies after years of perceived non-transparency and some bad calls, how would you suggest reinstating a fresh new trust based on transparency to the degree possible in intelligence? We're going to need it, is the question.
Well, I certainly agree with you, Gabby. We are going to need it. And when I was at the White House and when I was at CIA, I tried to speak out openly about some of the intelligence activities that the CIA and other elements of the intelligence community were involved in. I do believe the American people deserve to learn more about their intelligence community because there's just a lot of suspicions about what is going on. And if we get some new leadership, particularly in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and we get somebody who has, first of all, the trust and confidence of a President Biden, as well as the respect of the workforce, and a person who is not going to politicize the intelligence profession, I do think that there's going to be greater support and respect, not only within the ranks of the intelligence community for the leadership, but also greater appreciation on the part of the American people about what the intelligence community does. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, to be a bit more transparent, give Americans a glimpse into what actually happens in the national security area, and to encourage young Americans to consider a profession in national security as a future career option.
And Charles is asking, I recently heard that your security clearance has in fact not been revoked by the president. Do you still have access to adequate levels of classified information? And we should point out that there was a lot of reporting that the president had ordered your security clearance to be revoked, which would be highly unusual, if not unprecedented, for a former director of the CIA.
Now, all former directors of the CIA retain their clearances for the benefit of the government, so that if my successor or somebody within the CIA wants to talk to me about something that I was involved in, or my impression of how best to deal with one of my foreign counterparts, they could do that very quickly and have a conversation with me. But in the summer of 2018, because he is a very vindictive individual and was concerned about my speaking out against him, Donald Trump's White House announced that my security clearances were being revoked. well, in truth, they were never revoked because there was no legal basis to do so. But Donald Trump directed the CIA and the intelligence community not to share any classified information with me. So no, I have not had access to classified material. I don't need it because I don't do anything in my current life that requires that type of access. I was able to review some documents before I was questioned by John Durham, the special prosecutor of the Department of Justice, that is conducting this investigation into the origins of the investigation into Russia interference in the election. So I was granted access to a limited set of classified documents at that time, but aside from that, no. And I think the reason why my clearances weren't revoked because there was no legal basis to do so. And I think Donald Trump and others were really concerned that if they decided to do that, I would have had a strong basis to pursue legal action against them in that event.
Have you had access to your own papers?
No, as I write in the preface of my book, there have been many CIA directors who have written memoirs before me: Leon Panetta, Bob Gates, George Tenet, Mike Hayden, and others. And for each of them, they always requested access to their documents, their classified material when they were director. And in each instance, they were granted immediately and routinely the access that they had asked for. When I asked for that, they said, no, I couldn't see any of those documents. And then after about 11 months of haggling, they allowed me to see and to read heavily redacted copies of my schedule, and it's called my day book. But all classified information was taken out of it. And indeed, even on my schedule, if I had a call with one of my foreign counterparts, the fact of that call was redacted because they deemed that to be classified. So again, it just shows that Donald Trump has sought a number of different ways to punish me for my public criticisms of him.
Mary is asking, what constructive actions can our government and we as citizens do to rebuild our reputation throughout the world once Trump is out of office? And I won't presume to say, whether that's going to be in the next few months or another 4 years.
Well, I have a lot of foreign colleagues and contacts that I stay in touch with, and I must say that they are shaking their heads in dismay over what they are seeing taking place here in the United States. Not just the disunity within our country that really is undermining our ability to carry out our governmental functions, but also what Donald Trump has said and has done on that global stage, especially our partners and allies that, again, have looked to the United States for leadership. And the fact that Donald Trump continues to, harp on in this mantra of America first, of course, leaders of any country need to look at what their national interests are. But when Donald Trump says America first, what a lot of our foreign allies and partners are hearing is that the U.S. government under Donald Trump is going to focus on strengthening America and frequently at the expense of others around the globe. That the United States is going to use its great muscularity, militarily, politically, economically, financially, in order to advance its interests, but it's not going to try to do what it can to help others rise as well. And so I think one of the things that Joe Biden will do is immediately reassure and reach out to our partners and allies and say, the United States is back. We recognize that we have a lot of responsibility on this world stage. We have, I believe in American exceptionalism because we've had exceptional good fortune as far as all of the benefits that we have at living in this country, but we also have exceptional responsibilities on that global stage.
One of the things that has been so striking is that the president, whether it's NATO, the World Health Organization, any of these organizations that do make mistakes along the way and act at times not in our best interests, but that he has so aggressively criticized them and retreated from them that it has made it really difficult for our diplomats to be functioning.
Absolutely. He does not believe in multilateralism. And stepping away from international agreements such as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iranian nuclear deal, the Paris Climate Accords, and not really supporting the initiatives at the UN, as you point out, NATO, other types of multilateral organizations, they've atrophied as a result of the lack of U.S. engagement. And who benefits from that? Well, I think the Chinese and Russians and others. And so we are really losing out. If the U.S. voice is not strong and prominent in these organizations, other voices will then supplant ours. And I know that Joe Biden feels very strongly that the United States plays a very important, special, and unique role in world events. And he will, I think, reassert ourselves, the United States, in that, not in an aggressive manner or in a militaristic manner, but in the appropriate manner that allows people to understand that we are going to resume our leadership role.
Leslie is asking, with all of the information Trump knows, presumably because he has been getting briefings for 4 years, what will the intelligence do to monitor him when he is out of office and make sure he and his family don't tell Putin everything? Kind of a wonderful way to turn things upside down.
That's a really interesting question. I think it's a good question as well. I think we have seen that Donald Trump sometimes has been very haphazard in how he protects intelligence information, things that he has said in the Oval Office. Whether or not they're willful or inadvertent, I think it does hurt U.S. intelligence capabilities. What is he going to do after he leaves office? I don't think he's going to ride off quietly into the sunset. I think he's going to become still a voice, a very strong voice, and one that is going to be, I think, highly critical of the government and anybody who deigns to follow in his footsteps in the White House. So I would like to think that Donald Trump is not going to do anything so foolish as to harm the national security interests of the United States. But he does put himself first and foremost. That has been his MO, his modus operandi for his entire life. So I don't see that changing anytime soon.
We have a question about your basketball days, since you played basketball in your younger days. The questioner is wondering if you ever got on the court with Obama and what kind of player he was. I expect a very aggressive player.
Yeah, he would.
Competitor.
Yeah, well, there was a basketball hoop on White House grounds and also at Camp David. He is a very, very smooth player. He is left-handed. He has a very nice shot. Really has a lofty arc and a good eye. And he's, as you can imagine, he's very, very competitive. And so he's not unknown to throw an elbow now and then. But he is somebody who I think takes his physical fitness very seriously. And so he is a competent basketball player. I have had a number of my joints, as I mentioned in the book, replaced. I've had 3 hip replacements, and because one was recalled, and a knee replacement. So I wasn't able to keep up with them as much as I could have when I was younger.
Pete Souza told me a story, the White House photographer, showing me a picture of, I guess it was a pickup game during the UN week, the September annual meetings of the UN General Assembly, and they had some time. And so Reggie Love, who had played for Duke and was really good and was his body guy, his personal assistant, was doing a pickup game with Obama, and the president got one fabulous shot, and immediately at the end of the game went after Pete Souza and said, "Did you get that shot?" And Pete just, clicking as fast as he could, and thank goodness he said, he had a frame with the perfect shot with President Obama actually, beating Reggie Love, who is quite a bit taller and a lot younger. So he is competitive. Another question is asking, what can you tell us about the current CIA director, Gina Haspel, the first woman to run the agency, and her immediate predecessor, Mike Pompeo?
Well, I've known Gina for many years. She is a very, very competent and accomplished professional intelligence officer who I'm sure has a exceptionally difficult job in terms of fending off some of Donald Trump's sort of efforts to control the intelligence community. So I worked closely with Gina when I was director of CIA and even before then. Again, she has my respect and admiration. I'd like to think that she is holding fast against these efforts to intrude and to interfere in the intelligence mission. But I don't have inside knowledge of actually what's going on a day-to-day basis. Mike Pompeo, who was CIA director in the early days of the Trump administration, about a year or so, I think he has demonstrated that he puts personal loyalty to Donald Trump above institutional loyalty and his obligations to this country, unfortunately. Mike Pompeo is a very smart, and now increasingly experienced individual, but I think both in the Department of State as well as at CIA, I think he has demonstrated more of a personal loyalty and fealty to Donald Trump than is warranted, as well as is allowed by, I think, his constitutional oath.
One of the questioners is asking, it's a question from Al. I think it's Al. Do you think Bob Mueller in his investigation of Donald Trump failed in the investigation? And I'd amend to that, how surprised were you that they did not follow the money and pursue, whatever financial entanglements he may or may not have?
I have known and worked with Bob Mueller for over 20 years. He has my utmost respect and admiration for the work that he's done. A man of unimpeachable integrity and honesty. And the Mueller report that was done, I was surprised and dismayed that the financial strings were not pulled. Because I do think, just like any type of investigation or intelligence or law enforcement investigation, usually the money path will lead you to the sources of some of these problems, as well as the instigation of whether it be attacks or whether it be corruption. And so I think it stands to reason that Donald Trump is fearful of releasing his tax returns because he is concerned about what it will reveal about him. And I think somebody who had his own company for so many years, including so many bankruptcies, and who had flirted with the Russians and others, I do believe that the Mueller investigation would have been more thorough, comprehensive, and telling if the Mueller team was able to access those financial records, the international connections associated with those records, as well as to interview Donald Trump. Now, Bob Mueller had to make his own decisions about what to do, but I do think we've only learned some of what happened during the period of time that the Mueller report was looking at, and I think the American people deserve to know more.
There's a questioner asking something related to what you said earlier when I was asking you about Putin. In your personal opinion, do you think the president rejected the intelligence community's assessment of Russian foreign influence campaigns as a deliberate action to protect his personal interests in Russia, or as an act of inexperience and naivete?
Well, it may in fact be a combination of the two. I tend to believe it's more the former than the latter, which is that he was trying to protect the disclosure of things that could be politically damaging, personally embarrassing, or whatever. But there's something there. It's clear in my mind that Donald Trump has had this attitude toward Putin, toward Russia, for a reason other than just he wanted to befriend Vlad. There's something that he is concerned that, if disclosed, could hurt him. But again, Donald Trump is the one who knows what he has done. Vladimir Putin knows what Vladimir Putin knows about Donald Trump. But I do think that the American people, again, have a right to know what might be behind that closed door.
And another questioner wants to know, what will happen if President Trump tries to withdraw from NATO if he wins the election, or even if he loses during the lame duck period?
Well, I think any type of formal withdrawal from NATO is going to require a fair amount of review by Congress, by the American people. I think he could sort of unofficially withdraw in terms of engagement, but to actually pull the United States out of NATO, I don't know all of the requirements for that, but it's not something that he could do in the lame duck period. But your question about what Donald Trump might do in that period between the election and inauguration is a very good one, because a president of the United States has enormous authority and power. And might Donald Trump do something during that period of time that is going to really hurt the United States national security interests as a way to, again, be vindictive toward the incoming administration? Hopefully he's not going to do something that is just so reckless that really puts our country at great risk. But, I fully expect him to do things that are going to benefit him. He may issue himself a pardon for anything that he did during his time in the White House. The Constitution does not explicitly preclude a president from pardoning himself. Or he may step down and have, Mike Pence become president for a day or two with an agreement that there would be some type of pardon. But the one loophole there is that presidential pardons do not exonerate anybody at all from some type of prosecution by state courts.
You've obviously checked this out. Well, you clearly have a lot of fans here, because one of our questioners, and I think this is the last question we have time for, is whether or not you would ever run for president someday.
I was tremendously honored and privileged to have spent over 33 years in the government in some really, really interesting jobs and positions, and witnessing history. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, to share my experiences with my fellow Americans. I believe that 33 years of public service, I've done my part. I spend a lot of time now speaking to university students and encouraging them to pursue careers in public service and the intelligence community. I'm affiliated with my alma maters, Fordham University in New York, the University of Texas at Austin. And so I will do everything possible to try to provide to those who are carrying on the national security responsibility, to help them any way I can. But no, I don't plan to run for public office. I eschew politics. And I also do not plan to ever return again to government. It is a time for others to take up the baton and run with it. But my heart and soul is with my former colleagues and the future members of that community. So I appreciate the sentiment, but don't worry, you're not going to see me on any type of ballot or being sworn into office anytime soon.
Well, we appreciate you. And as I say, the book is Undaunted, and it's a wonderful tour of history of public service and of all of the recent history as well, as you've stood up for yourself against the powers in the authority right now. So thank you very much. Thank you for your courage. Thanks for everything you've done. And thanks for inviting me to be here with you with the Atlanta History Center. Kate?
Yes. Thank you both, Director Brennan, Andrea Mitchell. Thank you both so much. That was a great conversation. And thank you to our audience for joining us. I promised that the questions would be good, and you all delivered. They were great questions. So Director Brennan, best of luck with this book. I think we'll be talking about it for weeks. And Andrea Mitchell, good luck in the next few weeks, keeping your momentum. It's going to be a doozy for sure. But thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everybody. And it really was an enjoyable evening. I appreciate it.
For me as well.